Welcome to the July 2023 Cozy Mystery Book Club interview. I'm Zara Keane, and I'm here with our Spotlight Author of the Month, Kate P. Adams. Welcome, Kate.
Hello, thank you.
So as a start, I'm going to read Kate's formal biography, which is actually super interesting, and I'd like to dive into that. So after 25 years working in some of England's finest buildings, Kate P. Adams has turned to murder. Love it. Kate grew up in Derbyshire. Am I saying that correctly?
Yep, Derbyshire,
Yeah.
yep.
Excellent, yay. The setting for the Charlton House mysteries, and went on to work in theatres around the country, the Natural History Museum, London, the University of Oxford, and Hampton Court Palace. That is so cool. Kate has an unhealthy obsession with finding the perfect cup of coffee, enjoys a gin and tonic, and is managed by Pumpkin, a domineering tabby cat. Is Pumpkin going to make an appearance on this video? No.
No, sadly not. She's a house cat, and I'm in my studio at the bottom of the garden, so she's busy being grumpy in the house. Yeah.
Okay, right. So, well, thank you so much for joining us this month. I'm really excited to dive into a discussion about your story that you're offering this month, which is called Well Dressed to Die, and it's part of the Charlton House series. So can you tell us a little bit about the story itself and how it fits into the series in general?
Yeah, sure. Well, Dressed to Die is the 9th book in the series, and it's brand new. Nobody had read it before it got sent out to the Cozy Mystery Book Club. So it was definitely a preview or, a special event. And yeah, it's book 9. And this one takes the protagonist, Sophie, not exactly away from the house. The house is still very much the background and there. But in previous books, Sophie has kind of well, not annoyed, but a previous mystery involved the family, the Duke and Duchess, who live in the house that she works in, the Charlton House. So she's always been a bit nervous about investigating murders since then, in case it involves the Duke and Duchess. But this one is just outside in a local village and has no connection with the family. So she feels okay kind of getting stuck in eventually. So it is set around Maytime, and village, a small Derbyshire village just outside of the house, and around the rather fabulous Derbyshire custom that's been going on for hundreds of years called well dressing. And so yeah, it's a clear continuation. It's the same characters. You get to see them develop and their relationships develop whilst they investigate a rather unfortunate murder in the local community.
Oh, that sounds awesome. Well dressing, can you tell us a little bit about what that means without obviously spoiling the story?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so well dressing is a custom that goes back to the 1200s, really. And originally it was all over the UK, but it's now pretty much limited to the county of Derbyshire. And it's all about giving thanks for water.
Okay.
So what would happen in these little villages is the local inhabitants would dress a well. So these aren't, wells with stone circle walls that you look down on. These are wells that are sort of popping up out of the earth, and people would decorate them with images made out of flowers, really, is kind of what it's turned into. And this has been going on, like I say, for centuries and centuries, and it still happens, mainly in small villages around Derbyshire. 1 or 2 bigger towns do it, and a group from the local community gets together and produce fabulous decorations made out of natural items, foliage, so flower petals, twigs, sheep wool. There's even coffee beans in there, which I really like that in particular. Little pebbles, whatever, you name it, all from the natural world. And the images are typically religious, but not necessarily anymore. Now you can get historical images. During the time of the Queen's Jubilee, that would be a theme. You get Winnie the Pooh now because kids groups will do it, that sort of thing. So you have these fabulous images on big boards that sit behind sort of framing the well. And it was traditionally to give thanks for having drinkable water in these tiny communities in centuries gone by. So it's a beautiful tradition. It's one that is continuing and shows no sign of dying out. It's very much a community thing. And yeah, people get bussed into these little villages. So they turn nearby fields into car parks sometimes, that kind of thing. But yeah, they're fabulous. And I'd long wanted to include one in a book because it's so interesting and so attractive. And so this had been sort of sitting in my brain for a couple of years, and it was time to get it out onto paper, really.
Yeah, I love having these kind of ideas that you let percolate for a while, and then you find the perfect story to add them to. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Those
Yeah.
fantastic setting details, and yeah, something original that readers wouldn't necessarily have known before. And speaking of something that we wouldn't necessarily have known before, you used to work at Hampton Court Palace, which is really cool. I'm sure you got lots of behind the scenes stories and ghost stories and so on. Do you have any historical tidbits to share with us that maybe readers wouldn't necessarily know?
Oh, blimey. Well, I mean, one fun little detail, the chief executive's office, the current chief executive and through the last however many decades, they have a beautiful apartment office complex. It's just for them and their secretary. And that part of the building used to be the Tudor garderobe, which is the little toilet. So if that's not a comment on management, I don't know what is. But so that was always a fun little piece of knowledge. So there was that. One thing I found quite interesting when I discovered it was that, are you familiar with the Unknown Warrior at Westminster Abbey?
Yeah.
So for viewers, readers not familiar with that, at Westminster Abbey there has been buried an unknown, unidentifiable soldier from the First World War who was there to represent all the soldiers, the unknown soldiers who died, unidentified soldiers who died. And the coffin is made out of an oak tree from the Hampton Court Palace grounds, which I thought was really interesting. And then a part of the history that I find really interesting is that of grace and favour residents. And grace and favour residents at Hampton Court Palace were, and it wasn't just Hampton Court, it was other properties as well, were people who were offered free accommodation having done service to the monarchy. And also that included the widows of husbands who'd worked for the royal family. So you ended up with this small community in Hampton Court, and we're talking the 20th century, that sort of thing, 18th, 19th, 20th century period. And these incredible, I mean, a lot of sort of, fabulous, fearsome old ladies living in the palace whose husbands have predeceased them. But one who wasn't very old at all was a woman called Sophia Duleep Singh. And very few people have heard of her. She was an Indian princess. She was the goddaughter of Queen Victoria. She was given one of the properties on the grounds of Hampton Court. She moved to live in there, and she played a big role in sort of English society, British society, because she was a very active suffragette during the fight for the vote for women.
Wow.
People sort of don't expect that, but this Indian princess, who was an incredible woman, lived on site at Hampton Court and fought for our right to vote, which I thought was quite interesting.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
One other little thing that it's not actually Hampton Court, this is a Natural History Museum one that I always love, is that during the Second World War, the Natural History Museum was sort of like a little home for a James Bond-esque lab. So if you think of all the gadgets in James Bond, and you have all those scenes where, what's his name? Q.
Yes.
Showing James Bond all the fabulous little gadgets. Well, at Natural History Museum, during the war, there were people creating James Bond style gadgets, and it was things like exploding rats. They made plaster, cowpats and horse manure, and would stuff them full of explosives. And they even put machine guns inside fish to disguise them, that kind of stuff. So that was going on at the Natural History Museum. So that's a pretty cool little bit of information, I think.
You've got to work that into a book somehow. If you ever write an historical cozy mystery, then
Yeah,
absolutely go in
yes,
there.
we're not talking a modern day sort of exploding chocolate brownie or cup of coffee, which is probably my characters would create. Yeah.
Speaking of your characters and the book that is the spotlight pick for this month, Well Dressed to Die, you set it in the Peak District, and you come from that area, if I understand that correctly.
Yeah.
Can you tell readers a little bit about where this is and why it's important and how you work that into the mystery as a background setting?
Yeah, sure. Well, I grew up right on the edge of the Peak District. And the Peak District is a national park in the UK, in sort of northwest England. And in fact, it was the very first national park that was created in the UK. And it's an area of land about 550, I've got the facts, 555 square miles. So about the size of Greater London, really.
Right.
And it's this area of land that stretches out across 5 counties, thereabouts, including Derbyshire, which, you know, people hear me talk about quite a lot. So the Peak District is this beautiful national park with rolling hills, farmlands, gritstone edges, limestone dales. It's just beautiful. The highest peak is a mountain called Kinder Scout, and Kinder Scout was visible from the windows of our family home. Okay. So I grew up with that as my backyard, really. And we were very much a hiking and camping family, and most of our weekends were spent hiking. So the Peak District and its people and villages and some of its cultures are very much within me. They're in my bones, really. And I love going back. And I think that's one of the reasons why I absolutely wanted to make Derbyshire and the Peak District a key part of my work. I love reading books where the location is one of the characters, really.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, it's incredibly popular now. When you think about Cleves and the Northumberland coast, you know, that setting's huge when she writes about Shetland.
Yeah.
So it's a big thing now, and my love is Derbyshire. So, and actually, the Well Dressed to Die, one of my beta readers, once she'd finished it, said it read like a love letter to Derbyshire, and that was the best thing that anybody could say. So yeah, it's a huge part of my life, really. And despite the fact that I live in the US, I consider the Peak District my home. And it was essential, really, that it played a huge part in my books. It's beautiful, and it presents so many opportunities. I talk about not just well dressing, but some other myths and legends about Derbyshire in Well Dressed to Die. It has stunning architecture, beautiful buildings that inspire the work. It has, you know, different foods, whether it's, you know, it might be Bakewell tart or something like that, Bakewell pudding, sorry, which is very famous from that area, and I talk about in a previous book. So it gives me stacks of material, creates a beautiful backdrop, and is just such a part of me that I kind of want to be there in my head as well when I'm writing, and take my readers with me. So I mean, I've had one book, Capital Crime. I took the characters down to London, and the Joyce and Ginger series is different locations, but I will always have things set in Derbyshire. I'll always be writing Derbyshire / Peak District books, that's for sure.
I think that a lot of readers appreciate a setting that's a character, basically, that, you know, when the details are rich and you really feel that you're there, you're immersed in the story, and you get to experience a place that you've never been, maybe, or haven't been in a long time. Yeah, I'm a big fan of armchair traveling in books, for sure.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's also nice when the place that you're writing about, because it exists, the readers could go visit if they want.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of the places I reference are real. Key places like, I mean, Charlton House is fictional, but it's based on Chatsworth House in Derbyshire, amongst various other places. The village of Castledale in Well Dressed to Die doesn't exist, but it is based on one of the villages. And then a lot of the surrounding stuff, the villages and towns I mention, are real. I talk about my favorite cafe anywhere in the world is a place called the Set Valley Cafe, and that actually features in the book under its real name. The manager, using her real name and her permission, features in the book. So I think it's nice for readers to then be able to either go away and look it up online, or visit if they're passing through, or locals who read it can recognize places. And I think that gives an additional layer of pleasure to it.
Yeah. So you mentioned Joyce and Ginger in passing. So you have a spin-off series from the Charlton House mysteries that features Joyce and Ginger. Can you tell us a little bit about how that came about, how you decided to make this spin-off series, and how many books you have so far in that series?
Yeah, so Joyce and Ginger, there are currently 2 books, about to start working on a third. Joyce is a character from Charlton House, and she was just so much fun to write. She is a slightly older lady. She is very colourful, both in terms of appearance and her personality. She's very outspoken, and she was just great fun to write, that I kind of wanted to spend more time with her, really. And a lot of my readers really enjoy spending time with Joyce. And then a couple of books in, I think it's about book 5, I introduced her to a character called Ginger Salt. And Ginger could not be more different in every way. And yet they became bosom buddies. And I thought, okay, they need to go and have, girls' weekends away and holidays, because they're both single. And I thought, okay, well, that's kind of a good premise for the stories. So each book is them going away on vacation or for a weekend away. The first book, again, I wanted to keep it in Derbyshire.
Yeah.
So much to Joyce's chagrin, their first weekend away together is just up the road, which annoys her initially. But then they get sort of thrown into a murder investigation. The second book after that, I took them down to London. And I really wanted us to find out more about these women and what made them who they are. And Joyce's mother was a Tiller girl. And for those who aren't familiar with Tiller girls, Tiller girls were the influence for the Rockettes in New York. Those sort of all female dance troupes, lots of high kicks and sequins and things. Which means the theatre became a backdrop for book 2, and you learn an awful lot about, you learn quite a lot actually about Joyce's mother and Joyce's upbringing. And I used to work in the theatre as well, so I could bring that in. It was interesting doing research for that, particularly around Joyce's background and her mom. And the third book that I'm about to start writing will be up in Edinburgh. So they're heading off to Edinburgh and surrounding countryside. So they are, I say similar to Charlton House in terms that they are cozy and they have the kind of sense of humour that I use, and there's history and beautiful settings, but it's a different setting each time. And it's these 2 older women going off and having a blast and not caring what the world thinks and just taking life by the horns, really. And they're fun to write because they're such fun, outspoken characters. I really enjoy it, and I'm getting good feedback too, so I'm really happy with how they're going.
Oh, that's fantastic. Do you have a title yet for book 3, or is that still a work in progress?
The title is Murder Wears Tartan.
Ooh,
the cover designer is currently working on that, and I'm starting to plot it out. And my regular readers know that I love Edinburgh. I go there, must be 4 or 5 times a year actually now. So I love spending time in Edinburgh. I love Scotland in general. I've just come back from a week there. And so I've got it set initially in Edinburgh, and then they moved to the Highlands and Highland Games. So you have all the stuff like tossing the caber going on, and the bagpipes and men in kilts and that sort of thing. So it's ripe for humour and opportunity and murder weapons and spooky castles and all that kind of stuff. So I think this time my problem is going to be keeping the book, something shorter than the Bible. I think, there's so much I want to put in there. So that's the next one, Murder Wears Tartan, which should be out in November if all goes to plan.
So it sounds like you do a lot of research for your books. Do you spend a lot of time plotting the story itself, or do you plot and write as you go, or do you just pants the story?
Well, that's interesting, because I've always been a plotter. I always know what's going to happen, and I've never been able to sit down and write something without knowing where I'm going. And that might not be a lot of detail, but I always have the structure of the story laid out. I know who the killer is. I know why. I know all the red herrings, and it's all laid out for me. Not to say things don't change as I write. I have had those moments where I suddenly go, oh, he's the killer. He did it. I was wrong all along. I get those moments sometimes. Having said that, though, for the first time with Well Dressed to Die, I didn't plot it in the same way.
Okay.
It wasn't a conscious choice. I just sort of started doing it. And I made sure that when I got to the end of a day's writing, I knew what I was going to write the next day, but I didn't know beyond that. And it was the first time I'd ever done it. And I was probably at least 3/4 of the way through before I even realized it was what I was doing. I was just going in and writing and not even thinking about it. And it worked, which amazes me that it worked. And I wasn't sure if it would affect the quality of the book. One of my beta readers, who, I really trust her opinion, and she really gets into the weeds with my books and stuff. She said it's the best one I've written yet. So who knows? Maybe I'm just going to have to pants more often, which sounds very odd. But yeah, it seems to be the way to go, possibly. I don't know. I'll brainstorm ideas and have a big sort of massive spider diagram on a piece of paper, and then I might just sit down and get on with it again. We'll see.
Yeah. So the next book you're going to be working on is Murder in Tartan?
Murder Wears Tartan.
Murder Wears Tartan. Yes.
Okay. Yes. I'm hoping to do something else in between. I'm not going to make any promises, but I have got time between now and when I'm scheduled to start the next Joyce and Ginger to write a novella. And I think I know what I'm going to do, but I have two ideas. So whether or not it's a Charlton House or whether it's a Joyce and Ginger, I think it will probably be a Charlton House. But my plan is that there will be a novella that I will do before Joyce and Ginger. And that'll be out maybe October, fingers crossed. So we'll see. But definitely Joyce and Ginger for November. And then fingers crossed, a novella I'll get done before I start that.
Okay.
So I'll drink a lot of coffee. I'll drink a lot of coffee and try and get it written.
So where can readers find you if they want to keep in touch about your new releases and get your newsletter and so on?
Well, the best way is my newsletter, which is katepadams.com. Nice and easy for my website. You can sign up there. I'm also posting increasingly on Facebook on my author page now, where people can find out everything from research I've done when the book's coming out, me and Pumpkin the cat, my writer's world, articles I've seen that I think are relevant and interesting. So Facebook under Kate P. Adams author, and I'm also on Instagram as well. So that's how people can track me down.
Okay, well, thank you so much for chatting with me today. I appreciate it, and I'm sure our readers will also enjoy the interview. And everybody, don't forget to download Well Dressed to Die before the end of the month. Okay, thank you so much, Kate.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Bye.